Welcome back, pro wrestling fans. Welcome back, IWC. It's me. It's me. It's the GOC. Coming to you live to tape 25 feet below the surface of the earth. Hold on. I got to think about that one. Wait a minute. Quite the pickle, quite the dilemma. I'm live, but I'm taping this at the same time. Fuck it. Well, you guys get the picture. Here on Chaos Corner, Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel, for Story Time Continued. That's right. This is part 2 of the story of the original Sheik, the bloodthirsty Sheik, on one of his many tours over to Japan. Konnichiwa, bitches. Arigato from Chaos-san. Go back and check out the first part of this show. One episode, 40 minutes, going over the whole kit and caboodle. That's right, I said kit and caboodle of the Sheik. We are back here for part 2. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, say something. Sit back and you relax, grab a beverage, grab a snack. Follow me on all social media platforms, and you know what they are. At Big Daddy GOC, and the GOC stands for the Guardian of Chaos. That would be on X, a.k.a. Twitter. On Facebook, I have 2 accounts. That's right, there's 2. Prodigio Fidelis El Guardian and J Brony. That's right, J Brony for all you jabronis out there. Follow me on Gitter, Gab, Truth Social, Rumble. On Instagram, it's the Guardian of Chaos. Fans, you're not going to want to miss it. And of course, here, Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel. One man, unique, unedited, unscripted, raw dog for you, the fans. So again, we're going to jump right back into it. Part 2 of Story Time with the GOC, talking about the original Sheik, written by my good friend, or one of my friends anyway, from Arcadian Vanguard, from Shut Up and Wrestle, from PWI. That would be the one and only Brian Solomon. There's the cover. So we're going to jump off all those other social media platforms. Meet me back here on the YouTube channel for part 2 of the original Sheik. All right, fans, we're going to get right back into it where we were again. Go back and check out part 1. I'm uploading it now. It's about 40 minutes. It's an unbelievable listen, if I do say so myself. You come here to learn things, factual information, history. That's what you learn here on Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel. I say it all the time. No Patreon, no paywall, no Super Chats, no Venmo, Zenmo, PayPal, whatever it is that you guys use. I bring it to you out of my love, motivation, and passion for this industry, for this business. And starting this year in 2024, will be 40 years since I walked into the Quest facility back in 1984. However briefly, that was my introduction to the business. Let that sink in. Let that marinate on who you're listening to as I bring you into my home. Shout out to our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Without him, none of this is possible. Without you, the fans, this is impossible. Stay mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually fit. We're in crazy times in 2024. Nothing is guaranteed, especially tomorrow. Situational awareness, because something's coming. Whether it be the planet, environment, wars, invasions, the economy, the government. I don't want to get too crazy on here and be banned, or get strikes. Thanks for being here. We're going to get on to some more crazy stories. Part 1 was unbelievable about the Sheik. Solomon really put it out there. You know, he's a noted author, historian. He's got a book with Gorilla Monsoon coming out very soon. Again, if you're not listening or reading or following Brian Solomon, I don't know what you're doing. Again, this is a very thick, long book. I'm just giving you a portion of it. Probably about over the summertime, I want to say a good 7-8 months back when I met Solomon at FanFest 8 in the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. We talked, and I picked up a copy of the book, and I did a quick review on it, on the introduction and so on and so forth. So it's up here on the channel, but you'll have to filter through 2,500 videos. That's what you get here for free. And if you want to become a member or give me a tip for coffee or something, that's on you. Nothing's required here. I don't give a damn one way or the other, because I'm still going to do it. Whether there's 1 subscriber, 1,000, or 100,000. Whether there's nobody watching or somebody's watching, I know that I'm watching, and you know that I'm watching you. For all you creepers and people back there that like to report back. And this is what you get here. Professionalism. Reality. Kayfabe shoot combination with the GOC. Let's get back to part 2. 5 minutes here on the opening monologue. We don't want to get too crazy. We're talking about the Japanese tag team, the Open Tag League trophy that the Funk brothers just won over the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher. So here we are, back into it. Story time with the Guardian of Chaos. Oh my God, what a match. What a moment, marvels Saito. The Funks were like famous cowboys in Japan. That match made Abby and Sheik bigger heels because the Funks were so loved by the crowd out of the American teams. Abby's scary. Sheik's scary. And there's no language barrier about it. The match was burned into the psyche of Japanese fans, the older of whom still talk about it to this day. From that point on, the name of the Sheik, and Abdullah the Butcher for that matter, was inscribed among all the all-time greats, foreign wrestlers in the history of Curaçao. So notorious and revered was the matchup that it was revisited 3 times in their 1978 Tag League tournament. The pull-apart brawl after the match lasted a full 8 minutes and spilled all over the building. The following summer featured perhaps their wildest brawl of all. A savage gutter fight ruled a no contest after 21 minutes of chair throwing and pencil stabbing, with all 4 men reduced to bloody messes fighting through the crowd. For another 8 minutes, their final blood-drenched clash. In 1979, the Tag League tournament saw the Funks score a decisive victory at last when Dory pinned the Sheik after Abdullah accidentally laid out his own partner. This resulted in the inevitable falling out of the team, with the Sheik blasting the Butcher with not 1 but 2 fireballs. And it was rushed from the ring. These matches are not for the faint of heart. Not even modern-day standards. They are among the seminal bouts that set the bar for what would become hardcore wrestling, a bar that would say has never been cleared to this day, whether it be ECW, AEW, WWF, WWE. It doesn't matter. I'm being interrupted by Paul Roma, Mario Mancini right now. You never know what's going to happen here live on Chaos Corner. This is what happens when I have a live crowd here on Chaos Corner. The owners of Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling, head trainer, Pretty Paul Roma, and of course the owner, Mario Mancini. Guys, what can I do for you? I will be, listen, look, it's Roma and Mancini show up my house with food for the GOC. Guys, go up, throw on the tube, and I'll be down. Well, I'll be up in about 5 minutes. Roma, you look tremendous, jacked, ripped, shredded wheat, buffed. And Mancini, well, you look your usual self. You were the youngest wrestler in the WWF back in 1984. What, 18 years old? In the WWF from 84 to 92? And of course, Roma, you, pretty wonderful, Power and Glory, 4 Horsemen, Young Stallions. Guys, give me time. I got to finish up with the Sheik here. Don't throw me the double bicep, Roma. Mancini, do you have to have the spit cup and the dip down here? All right, give me 10 minutes. I got to get part 2 of the Sheik. I'm coming up. You never know who's going to show up here. Legendary men, Paul Roma and Mario Mancini from Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling. So, guys, sorry for the interruption. Let me take a moment there while the boys are going upstairs. Emilio's around here somewhere, the Maine Coon, my rather large Maine Coon. He's a little under the weather, so I need prayers for Emilio. He's a savage, though. Make no mistake about it. And so we're praying for the boy. Always going into business for himself. Roma, I said I'll be up. Mario, really? You got to moon me here on my own show? Should I bring them on camera? No, because then that takes the heat away from me. Speaking of Japan, ginseng, konnichiwa. All right, let me get back. All right, go. I got to throw legends out of my bunker. You can sit if you want. Okay, where were we? We're in the middle of the feud of Abdullah and the Sheik breaking up. Talking about their seminal bouts and how hardcore, long before ECW ever came into the sphere in the middle 90s, and so on and so forth, even to today with the AEW current match from last year, a few months back, of Strickland and Page and Blood. And listen, you guys know my viewpoints. You know I do the live to tape watch alongs. I cover AEW, the WWE, the NWA, MLW, New Japan, Ring of Honor, and TNA Impact. You know I cover them all. And of course, Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling, my home. You know that I moderate for the #1 fucking podcast on YouTube, and that would be JD and Off the Script. JD from New York, and of course, Tuesday Night Titans with his partner Andrew Baydala. Wednesday night Dynamite reviews with the Chi-Town Smart, my boy, Heel Jesse, who also has his own YouTube channel where he covers TNA Impact. My buddies over at the Wrestling Council, Slow and Steady wins the race. They certainly have the experience, and that would be Comic Book Bob, my brother Hollywood, and of course their partner, here's Johnny. Who could forget the #1 podcaster, fastest rising across the pond, and that would be Maurice over at Cheap Heat Productions, who has the Mario Mancini show. If you haven't been over to Cheap Heat Productions, he's doing unbelievable, his work with Jack Kilby from Great North Wrestling. If you guys don't watch the Mario Mancini show with Maurice from Cheap Heat and Jack Kilby from Great North, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. I really don't. And then there's my old standby, the historian, the professor from Pro Wrestling Wire, from WON Sports, from the PWZ podcast, and that would be my buddy, my mainstay, the Professor Rick Del Santo. And while we're at it, I might as well give a shout out, since we've been interrupted by Roman Mancini, I might as well give a shout out to my one and only loyal sponsor, and that would be Mr. Hempel Stilskin, over at Sweet Heel CBD. That's right, Sweet Heel CBD, sweetheel.com, and my old buddy, Mr. Hempel Stilskin. If you use the promo code CHAOS, CHAOS, you get 20 or 25% off your products. Everything from balms to tinctures to lotions to flour to edibles. It really is unbelievable. I don't go a day without using Sweet Heel CBD. I mean, that's just the truth of it. My 25 years behind the walls, private investigator, personal bodyguard, security, bounty hunter, pro wrestling manager who took the fucking bumps. That's why I go to Mr. Hempel Stilskin and Sweet Heel CBD, purity, clarity, wellness. So now that I don't think I missed anybody, just wanted to put it out there for all. Well, you know what? I did miss one person, actually two people, as I get interrupted by Mancini and Roma. That would be the one and only Don Tony. How could I not mention Don Tony on my show, where I moderate for his channel, along with JD and Off the Script with Baydala and Jesse moderating their channels, especially Off the Script. I'm a loyalist and a moderator to Don Tony. To sit down with Don Tony is now on Fridays as opposed to Sundays. I don't agree with it, DT. Sundays was the greatest way to end the week or begin the week, whatever you want to see, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to talk about. Don Tony is the OG, 25 years in this podcasting industry. And the boys are back together. The boys are back in town. Not only the OG Don Tony, he has hooked up again with his old buddy, Kevin Castle. What's going on, Kev? So the DT and KC show are back. No longer just Don Tony, except on certain nights. So, and all the history between Don Tony and Kevin Castle. So I'm going to say that to say this because I tell it like it is. JD and Off the Script with Andrew Baydala and Jesse over on his channel, Chi-Town Smart. Don Tony and the Don Tony and Kevin Castle show. Let that marinate and sink in. The boys are back in town. Maurice and Jack Kilby over at Cheap Heat Productions and Great North Wrestling. Big Bob, Hollywood, and Johnny over at the Wrestling Council. And of course, the aforementioned Professor Rick Del Santo. Follow all those podcasts. Subscribe to all those guys. Hang out with me when I moderate over there. You're not going to find any more factual information and entertainment and true opinions and views from people who are in the know than that group that I just mentioned there. Stand by, man. I just went off on a big tangent there. I hope I can find where I was. We were talking about the Sheik Abdullah the Butcher, so on and so forth. Their run against the Funks over in Japan, the breakup of Butcher, how hardcore and Sheik. For a man in his early 50s for whom the rigors of the ring had taken their toll, these tours could be quite demanding. Eddie Jr. put it best when asked to recall his father's reaction to those Japanese trips. They were tough, hard, cold, wet, long, and boring. There's a lot to be said for a lot of that and a lot of different things in life. I think so. What do you think? He couldn't wait to get home. He said they were just very tough tours. People thought it was glamorous, like you were a movie star, but your means of getting to different cities in that area were very hard. By the time he got home, he had to rest for 2 weeks just to recuperate. But they also paid very well. And as worldwide sports circled the drain at the end of the 1970s, they were among the only things enabling the Farhats to fend off bankruptcy, or at the very least postpone it. In his 2003 book, Chokehold, Jim Wilson claimed the Farhat's standard Japanese deal was for $5,000 per match. Remember the time frame here in the 70s. Now it's 15, 20, 25 grand a match for certain stars that went on to go over there. The Road Warriors, Brody, Hanson, among others. Not $5,000 a match for what would often amount to 10 minutes of work. And it was said that he would come back from his Japanese trips with his wrestling boots literally filled with money. Farhat was also using his new connections in Japan to get more of his talent booked over there as well. This included Killer Tim Brooks, whom he helped get started over there beginning in the fall of '77. And in my opinion, Tim Brooks, one of the most underrated wrestlers in the history of the business, along with guys like Black Bart, Outlaw Ron Bass. I mean, there's many others I can talk about, just to throw it out here to be related to the story. Leading to a long-running relationship between Brooks and All Japan that continued for years after Big Time Wrestling folded. In addition to the Big Funk's tag team match, the 1978 Tag League Tour was a 9-day affair that saw Sheik square off with some familiar opponents, like Baba and Ceruto, a.k.a. Ceruta, as well as Nick Bockwinkel, the golden-haired second-generation superstar from St. Louis, whom the Sheik had faced first in Chicago's International Amphitheater back in 1956, when Bockwinkel was 21-year-old rookie and who now wore the AWA World Heavyweight Championship, a title had held for the past 3 years by Bockwinkel. As Eddie Jr. described after Farhat returned home on December 10th, he took most of the rest of the month off, working only 3 matches on the big-time wrestling circuit, including a defense of the U.S. title against Bobo Brazil in Toledo. On Christmas Day, that was on Christmas Day, Bobo and the original Sheik. I shouldn't even have to say that, but I did work with the Iron Sheik as well. Our infamous Jerry Springer episode where I was on Jerry Springer with the Iron Sheik, with Anthony from the Pitbulls, with Little Jeannie, a.k.a. Sweet Destiny. Yours truly. It was a work. It was a lot of fun, even though I had an NDA back then. It's long since expired. But just to hang out with the Sheik, and it was in Chi-Town. What a night and couple of days that it was with the Iron Sheik. Just to make it relatable. That's what you get here on this channel. Without as much creative control over the pace and style of his matches as he had at home, those Japanese tours were getting tougher and tougher on his aging body. By the summer of 1979, what am I at that point? 17 years old? Something like that? 16, 17? Big Time Wrestling was a shadow of its former glory, running only a couple of shows per month. And the Sheik's schedule was nothing like it had been. In June, he is only known to have had 6 matches. That's what they do in 2024, not even that much. Imagine back then when they were wrestling in a 30-day month or 31 days. You're working 28, 29 days, sometimes 30 days out of the 30 days. Let that sink in compared to 2024. Oh, they work smarter, the business has changed. I get it. I'm just telling you the truth. I give you the good, the bad, and the ugly on this fucking channel. I apologize for cussing. In June, he was only known to have had 6 matches, a couple for Nick Gulas in Tennessee, a couple for Dave McKigney in Ontario, and 2 shows at Cobo Arena, one of which was a chain match against the mighty Igor that lasted less than a minute. In July, he took more dates in Japan than he did in North America. With Big Time Wrestling running only 2 shows the entire month, not only was his business failing, but so was his working ability. Japan once again offered him a chance to make up for that former and to get around the ladder. Sheik may have been slipping out of mainstream of America wrestling, but he was just as much an icon as ever in Japan. Similarly, like that, at the end of the year, after having worked just 2 Kobo dates and 1 Toledo Arena date in November, Farhat headed back to Japan for his 3rd All-Japan Tag League tournament, where he had Abdullah, who would finish in 3rd place behind only the Funks and the team of Giant Baba and Jumbo Saruta. So it's the Sheik and the Butcher, Dory Jr. and Terry, and Baba and Saruto. On December 2nd, and Hokkaido on the day 3 of the 2-week tour, the Sheik battled another international superstar, Mil Mascaras. And true to form, both men once again avoided having the job to the other, ending their match in a double countout. See how different it was back in the days of the 70s and 80s, and we'll include the 60s, of how serious the business was, a title, a territory, the money, not losing, not jobbing out, doing it the right way. Do you see the difference between today and 2024? I hope that you do as a historian, traditionalist, researcher, countless hours of videos. I hope you guys realize what's going on here and the differences. I know things evolve, life evolves, I get it. But you still have to look in that rear view mirror. That side view, rear view mirror. Because without that, and respecting those who paved the way and recognizing where you come from, you wouldn't be where you are. And you certainly wouldn't, when you turn around and look in that big, wide windshield, get to where you're going. There's 3 types of people in this world. Those who don't know what happened, those who wonder what happened, and people like the Guardian of Chaos and here on this channel that make things happen. And remember, in order to get respect, you have to start with respecting yourself. Once you do that, you open other people's minds to respecting you. Farhat headed back to Japan for, as I said, the 3rd All-Japan tournament. We know the teams. We know Mil Mascaras came in, and they didn't want a job to each other, the Sheik and Mascaras. When 1 week later, Abdullah and the Sheik battled Mascaras and his similarly masked brother, Dos Caras. The result was, unsurprisingly, another double countout. The tour concluded on December 13th, after which the Sheik made 1 stopover in Hawaii. Pehaoi, Melihini Kane, Pupule, Wiki Wiki. Mahalo and aloha from the GOC for all my brothers. The Sheik made 1 stopover in Hawaii to work a date for Peter Maivia, the High Samoan Paramount Chief, a real-life Samoan High Chief who had been a major star for Ed Francis and Lord James Blears, before buying the Hawaiian territory from them earlier in that year. And I believe this is 78, 79. After arriving home in time for the holidays as usual, he worked very few dates for the next few weeks, taking his typical post-Japan break. It was the first year in which he had worked multiple overseas tours, owing in part to the fact that he was needed less and less on the home front. Multiple tours would become the norm for the Sheik going forward, as he began relying on taking dates wherever he could get them, with his own promotion folding. In late April and early May of 1980, and I was spot dead balls on with the time frame, he was brought to All Japan for a week and a part of the Champion Carnival. However, possibly to avoid needing to ask him to do any jobs, the Sheik was kept out of the tournament itself, being used instead as a special attraction. Japanese audiences, now having grown a bit accustomed to his act through repeated visits, among the highlights of the 1980 Champion Carnival Tour was April 24th, a match against one of the industry's new young lions, a 26-year-old product of West Texas State University named Ted DiBiase, the adopted son of Iron Mike DiBiase, who had died of a heart attack in the ring at the Fair Park Coliseum in Lubbock in 1969. The week built up to May 2nd in the Sheik's first Japanese match against Abdullah the Butcher. The death match paid off to their falling out of the previous December. Although technically just 3.5 minutes, bell to bell, Coast to coast, border to border, pillar to post, the two men brutalized each other for much longer than that, with a brawl throughout the arena that lasted longer than the match itself. Not even TV announcer Takeo Kuromuchi was safe. He wound up a bloody mess as well. The hyper-violent bout was deemed so disturbing by Nippon TV that they refused to air it. Most telling of all was the crazed Abdullah the Butcher, which positioned as the babyface, proving that fans would choose to cheer for literally anyone over the Sheik. But it was also a sign of the changing of the guard. Abdullah's star in Japan was on the rise, as he became more of a central gaijin figure, while the Sheik's was gradually waning. The very next day, the Sheik was bandaged up and back in Cobo Arena in Detroit, reclaiming the United States Championship from the mighty Igor. Only 3 matches in the Michigan-Ontario area would follow that month. By the fall of 1980, big-time wrestling had effectively closed up shop, and Farhat was getting used to promoting much smaller independent shows around the Michigan and Ohio areas, as well as becoming much more itinerant. How do you like that? Taking bookings wherever he could get them. In November, after a week spent in sunny Florida wrestling for Eddie Graham's promotion, Farhat came home for Thanksgiving, and then was promptly back on a plane to Japan to take part in the 4th World Tag League Tournament. This time, his selected tag team partner, are you listening, would be an interesting and slightly controversial choice, particularly from Farhat's point of view. Frankie Kane of Columbus, Ohio, was a 20-year veteran who had gotten his start working for Nick Goulet's and Roy Welch contingent down south and got his first taste of success teaming with fellow Goulas-Welch regular Rocky Smith as the groundbreaking Masked Infernos tag team. See what you learned here? Known to terrorize Southern rings with their manager J.C. Dykes in the late 1960s, the Infernos were also known to throw fire, something the Sheik had already been doing for years by that point, and Kane would take that fire gimmick with him when he left the tag team in 1969 to strike out on his own as the Great Mephisto. That's what you learn here on Chaos Corner. Facts, actual, factual fucking information. I apologize. The Persona was probably the most successful of all the Sheik knockoffs of the era. But it was still a knockoff, or at least that's how Farhat saw it. And with the beard, the robes, the kafaya and camel trunks, it would be hard to disagree, even if the Great Mephisto did cut his own promos. All through the 70s, Kane had taken the gimmick on the road to places like Florida, Texas, Northern California, all places where Farhat had worked before. One story has it that Farhat walked up to Kane when he got off the plane in Tokyo, slapped him in the face, and said, "That's for stealing my gimmick." I asked Frankie Kane about that, offers Scott Teal, who worked with Kane on his autobiography. He said he never had any problems with the Sheik over gimmick infringement, never had any words about it. If there was any heat, it certainly was minimal and quickly dispersed, especially since the two men had to work together on a 14-day, 12-city tour. The Sheik and the Great Mephisto faced off against teams like the Funks, a now former AWA World Champion Nick Bockwinkel and Jim Brunzell, one half of the AWA's top babyface tag team at the time with B. Brian Blair, actually with Vern Gagne's son, Greg Gagne, to begin with, Baba and Saruda, as well as Abdullah and his new partner, Yaha Tora Kamata, another Hawaiian working as a Japanese. In singles appearances, Sheik also rekindled his one-on-one way with the Butcher, battling him in another gruesome affair in Sapporo on December 1st, in which Farhat took the blade to both his head and his arm for horrifying effects. Remember the time frame, 1980, 1981. That's when I was in college. The 80s were great. 1981 was a good year. The match ended in disqualification for the Sheik when the Great Mephisto interfered on his behalf, followed by Tor Kamata, who joined Abdullah to run the heels off. 8 days later, in Osaka, Sheik crossed paths with another promising young star of the new generation, 27-year-old Ricky Steamboat, who had been one of Jim Crockett Jr.'s top baby faces in the Carolinas for the past 3 years and was, in fact, then the reigning Mid-Atlantic heavyweight champion. How about that? Let that marinate. Watching Steamboat's explosive serial offense and aerial moves, Sheik's then largely immobile working style is jarring, to say the least. Sheik even takes an extremely rare dropkick bump from Steamboat, but before long the match devolves into usual stabbing, chair throwing, and brawling all around the arena. After the Sheik is inevitably disqualified, he wanders through the crowd absolutely covered in blood, seeming to take pleasure from sending the Japanese spectators fleeing in terror in his path. The year, again with the time frame I'm dead balls on, 1981 would be the last Farhat would come to work for Giant Baba. But he made the most of it with 3 separate tours, one in January right after the new year, one in late spring, and one at the end of the year for his final World Tag League appearance. A renegade outlaw from the NWA by that point, a man without a company, he was still shown loyalty by Baba despite Baba's prominent NWA membership. On January 3rd, 1981, less than 4 weeks after having left, the Sheik was back in Tokyo taking on Abdullah the Butcher in Korakuen Hall for the Butcher's United National title, the same title Sheik had briefly held during his first Japan visit back in 1972. It would be the last time the two men would face off on Japanese soil. After only a 5-day run filled with the expected 5-minute disqualifications and countouts, Farhat was back home, catching his breath before hitting Florida for a 1-week engagement for Eddie Graham. At the time the Sheik returned to Japan in late May, he hadn't worked anywhere for nearly a month. With more free time on his hands, he was able to devote 3 weeks to the tour, making the longest of his All-Japan runs. This extended tour included his final singles match with Baba himself, taking place on June 1st and June 6th. Sheik never did get that elusive win over the Giant. But just as had been happening in the States, it had become apparent in Japan that the Sheik was really at his best at that point. With a tag team partner, someone younger and more mobile to take the bumps and take the falls if need be. Veterans, I hope you're listening up. People with longevity in this business. On this tour, 2 red-hot heel performers were chosen. One was 35-year-old Michael Davis, who had begun wrestling for Vince McMahon's Capitol Wrestling in 1961 at the tender age of 15, but who really started picking up steam some 14 years later when McMahon christened him Bugsy McGraw. McGraw had some previous success as a Gaijin wrestler for All Japan. At the time, he worked with the Sheik. He was coming off several prosperous years in Florida and was on the verge of going to Dallas to become a superstar for Fritz von Erich. Sheik's other tag team partner on the Spring 81 tour was Fijian, former bodybuilder, and 10-year wrestling veteran James Rahar. Let it sink in. Who had broken into the business in the Pacific Northwest as who? Anyone? Bueller? This never gets old. Bueller? Anyone? Superfly Jimmy Snuka, and was now a leading heel for Crockett, best known for popularizing top rope maneuvers. After capping off the 3-week tour with a rematch against Steamboat, Sheik returned to the States for another 3-week break before heading back down to the Sunshine State. By that point, one of only a few American territories that was still using him. Much of this time in those days was spent working for Bearman Dave McKigney in Ontario, which he spent most of the summer and early autumn of 1981. His partner for the last All-Japan World Tag League tournament in late November and early December was someone with whom he was well acquainted. Mark Lewin, the maniac Mark Lewin, the Purple Haze, now working a maniacal heel gimmick after decades as a white meat babyface. And speaking of maniacs, the last tour helped Farhat get to know someone who represented the future of Gaijin wrestling in All Japan and whom he shared a lot of traits with both in and out of the ring. Anyone? Bueller? Frank Goodish had been a San Antonio sports writer before his 6'8", 300-pound frame and impressive football background nudged him into the world of pro wrestling in 1973. 3 years later, the ball really got rolling on his career with Vince McMahon brought him into the Worldwide Wrestling Federation for a run against Bruno Sammartino and gave him the name Bruiser Brody. With a long, scraggly beard, a black mane of hair, and a head full of scars, he made a name for himself as an uncontrollable wild man. A wild man of the squared circle, a master of the brawling style who delighted in taking opponents apart with a throaty bellow. Whoo! Whoo! And a crazed look on his face and in his eye. He had been turning heads in Japan ever since his first tour there in 1979, checking a lot of gaijin boxes for Japanese fans as he did. He was also quickly gaining a reputation as a man of very strong opinions, who would go to great lengths to protect his best interest. It was rare to see a worker, most of whom just did whatever the promoters told them, fearing for their livelihoods. Brody had no such fear, and the best way to describe him, depending on who you asked, from many fellow workers who revered him, he was a champion of the boys, who refused to be taken advantage of. To most promoters, he was a difficult pain in the ass whom they tolerated because he drew money like water from a well. Like the Sheik, he very often refused to do jobs and would sometimes even refuse to sell for an opponent he didn't respect. By all accounts, they had very similar attitudes toward the business, being both as independent-minded as they were. Sheik really respected Bruiser Brody for looking out for himself and not allowing promoters to screw him over, explains the historian and writer Scott Teal, as does Brian Solomon in his book right here. In short, they both knew their worth and the value of protecting their marketability, and they recognized in each other men who could keep their heads above the bullshit of the business. That's a factual information right there. I can attest to all of that. Brody and the Sheik faced each other twice on that tour. Once in a tag team match with Snuka and Lewin as their respective partners, and once in a singles match that saw Brody win by disqualification. They had run into each other before in the spring of '77 while working in Dallas, but this time was different. This was the changing of the guard moment. Following his last date of the tour, a December 13th tag team match with Lewin against the legendary reunited tandem of Harley Race and Larry the Axe Hennig, the Sheik returned home to Michigan, never to return to All Japan Wrestling. Brody, meanwhile, went on to become one of the major American faces of the new era of All Japan, along with the likes of Stan the Lariat Hansen, Terry Bam Bam Gordy, and Dr. Death Steve Williams. The era of the Sheik was over. He just stopped, remembers Fumi Saito. He didn't come back. It was very symbolic because 1981 was the only time Sheik had made 3 tours. And there was Jimmy Snuka, Ricky Steamboat, and the Von Erichs on tour. With Sheik and the up-and-coming superstars, it was like handing the torch. That was the last time. The Sheik's withdrawal from Japan was part of a larger development. At 55 years of age, his in-ring career was clearly winding down, and probably several years later than it should have. His schedule was slowing down more and more into part-time territories, and by September of 1982, he had effectively gone into semi-retirement. His personal and professional lives were in shambles. His body was starting to disobey him, typified by his aging lips, severely compromised from years of ring rigors and badly in need of surgery. Japanese promoters and fans had been willing to overlook his age and obviously his limited style. After a time, the legend of the Sheik was all that was keeping it going, overshadowing the actual man who had created it. Obviously, his age limited his style. But there was only so far that could go, and eventually it was time to draw the curtain. Those years in Japan had given his career a new lease at a time when American audiences were moving away from him. Still, reality eventually caught up with him, even across the sea, as it does for all of us. But the legend of the Sheik, much like the man himself, was a difficult thing to destroy and proved to have staying power long after most presumed it was dead. The Sheik would do very little wrestling anywhere in the 1980s, but the day would come, almost exactly a decade after he left it behind, that the land of the rising sun would once again hear witness to the fearsome visage of the noble Sheik. He would be a very different man by that point, bowed with age and in ill health. The wrestling business would be a very different business, and the company he would work for would be about as different from Baba's All Japan as you could get. But the name value he had worked so hard to build in that country would serve him well, and Japan would one day come into the picture once again, just when the Sheik needed it more than ever. Fans, I can't thank you enough for being here. This is part 2 of the original Sheik, Brian Solomon's book, story time here with the GOC, Blood and Fire, the unbelievable real life story of wrestling's original Sheik. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. We will revisit this incredible novel. I'm looking through some unbelievable pictures here of the original Sheik. Great read. And again, I hope you guys enjoyed it. We will be back for the next chapter, which is after the fabled historic movie from the 70s, I Like to Hurt People. Go out and check out that video. It's on the tube, I'm sure. You can find it somewhere streaming. I Like to Hurt People with the Sheik, Freddie Blassie, so on and so forth. Thanks for being here on Storytime, Chaos Corner, Guardian of Chaos, the YouTube channel. I got to go upstairs. The boys are waiting. Who knows what storylines and what deals we have set up for Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling and the front office. So I'll say that to say this because I tell it like it is. Don't you dare miss it.